I am marketing manager here at the Global Good Fund. And we are so excited to bring you this amazing panel of brilliant leaders to discuss how today's youth is taking on society's greatest social challenges. If you have any questions at all for our speakers during the program, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. Today's moderator is Jenny Anderson. She is a 2020 Global Good Fund Fellow and the co-founder and CEO of Celebrate EDU. Inspired by her brother Brent, who is on the autism spectrum, she founded the nonprofit Celebrate EDU to empower people with disabilities through business and entrepreneurship education. She'll be leading today's conversation. So Jenny, thank you so much for being with us. And with that, I will pass it over to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining today. I'm super glad to be here to moderate today's wonderful panel. And I'm going to start, before we get into the topic, of having everybody introduce themselves and just a little bit about who they are and what they do and how they got to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and start with Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah LaHayne. I am the founder and CEO of Move This World. Move This World strengthens the mental, emotional, and social well-being of pre-K through 12th grade students, educators, and families through evidence-based multimedia. So now more than ever, we recognize the need to support the whole child and champion mental health so that we can navigate challenges, we can move through stressors, we can move through grief and loss and trauma, and have the tools to be able to identify, express, and manage our emotions every day and build safe and supportive learning environments, whether that's at home or in a school building. I was a 2014 Global Good Fund Fellow, and today Move This World has impacted 1.5 million students across 38 states. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Karim, I'm going to have you go next.
Hey, Jenny. Hey, all. My name is Karim Abouelnaga. I'm the founder and CEO of Practice Makes Perfect. We're a public benefit corporation, and we partner with low-income schools on the K-12 side, really running programs before, during, and outside of school hours to help kids maintain their academic proficiency. So really focused on closing the opportunity gap. I started the company when I was 18 years old, so back in 2010, and I am a 2015 Global Good Fund Fellow. So excited for the conversation today.
Amazing. All right, Ximena, I'm going to have you go next.
Hello, thanks for having me. I am Ximena Hartstock and the founder of a technology company called Tech Apprenticeships, which is technology to recruit and advance apprenticeships for people, especially in vulnerable communities in the US. And previously, I co-founded a digital grassroots advocacy company called Phone to Action that powers movements all over the world, especially young people use as Phone to Action to get connected with lawmakers, or to join different causes, and to also participate in elections. Pearl Jam, Ariana Grande, Jay-Z, Beyonce used our tools heavily during the past election to move everyone to vote. And I'm excited about the conversation, and thanks for having me.
Wonderful. All right, Calla.
Hi, everybody. My name is Calla O'Neill, and I'm the co-chair of the National Youth Board at an organization called Graybridge, which is a nonprofit that fosters meaningful relationships among people of all races through an interactive journey of connection, discovery, and impact. And it's aimed at creating racial unity. To say a little bit more about me, I'm a 17-year-old. I'm a high school junior at Whittle School and Studios in Washington, D.C. And I did an internship for Global Good Fund back in 2018. So I'm super amazed and just so excited about the work that they're doing. And it's so cool to be a part of it. And I'm very excited to be speaking on this panel today.
Great. And finally, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Franco. My pronouns are she, they. I am an 18-year-old and currently a freshman at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, majoring in sociology, minoring in law. I am also on the National Youth Board for Graybridge. And when I am not doing Graybridge work or at school, I am a teaching assistant for 5th grade students in the South Bronx.
Amazing. Well, what a panel we have here today. I'm so excited to be moderating this conversation and talking about the biggest social issues facing our time and how youth today are looking at those. And something we cannot ignore about the past year has been COVID. So I have this first question for Karim, which is, can you talk a bit about the COVID achievement gap? And is it possible to close this gap after this year we've had in education?
Yeah, I mean, I think the COVID achievement gap built on what was already a large amount of achievement gaps. I mean, we work at some of the poorest schools in New York City, and I'll tell you that some of the school leaders just said that this for the first time was starting to get real attention, because now we've started to see that there were disparities before this, so it wasn't new. And I mean, I had schools who were basically saying like that this is just the same thing that's been happening here now. It's just happening in all the other schools, which is why people care about it. So there's been an elevated level of consciousness. Could we close it? I mean, I think the answer is yes. Do we have the willingness to do what it takes to ultimately close it? I think is the bigger answer. We just saw a large stimulus bill come in. So I think the funding and the resources are there, at least in the short term. I think the big fear that folks in education have is that the system itself and folks who've been leading it for a really long time haven't had the foresight to be able to plan long term. And so this short-term funding that could be used to fully create pathways to help create the sustained change that ultimately needs to exist may not be there. And so will we wind up wasting this opportunity again? And I think that question is on all of us to answer. I know we're doing everything we can on our side to keep innovating and thinking about the future, but it's going to take the collective to make it happen. But it's definitely possible.
Awesome. Well, if anyone else has something to say about the COVID achievement gap, please feel free to hop in as well. I want this to be as conversational as we can.
Jenny, I will say though, for kids who are going through it, that there's no such thing, right? And I didn't learn about the achievement gap or the disparities in education until I got to college, and I was like, oh, what's this achievement gap? Oh, opportunity gap. And you forget that a lot of these things are adult language or adult speak, right? For kids who are going through the system right now, they're not thinking about a COVID learning loss or being deficient or not having something. Like, these are adult-made concepts and language, and I think we always need to be cognizant of that when we're talking about kids and talking about closing gaps or recovering. For our children, for the most part, they've just been out of school and now are doing school online. They're not thinking about what they're missing out on or what they have missed out on during this time period.
I'd like to echo that. This is Sarah. I think that this concept of learning loss in many ways is pretty problematic, because we all learn in different ways. And there are some students who have really thrived in this time, who've benefited from more time at home. There are students kindergartners who now know how to navigate Google Meet and Microsoft Teams better than adults who run companies. And so the ability to navigate technology, to navigate challenges, to solve problems, to be resilient is also something to celebrate. There are silver linings and moments that we should continue to champion even when we return to school buildings in ways that we were used to.
I actually would like to comment on this conversation. Just coming from the point of view of a student right now, I was class of 2020. I graduated right when, my final months of my senior year were taken by the pandemic, and then starting off college as a freshman in a new environment, it was a complete shift of what I expected. And so I definitely agree. I think that we weren't a lot of students weren't really aware of, I guess, the loss or the academic loss that they would be missing out on. Possibly more so with younger students. At least when I worked with first and second graders, a lot of them were kind of confused on the shift, but they had eventually become accustomed to the way that they were learning. But I think for older students, at least seniors or high schoolers in general, it was a little bit more more so like, yeah, we were somewhat aware that we were losing out on some learning. For example, some students who were 4.0 students stopped attending classes simply because of so many of the other pressures that come with COVID. Specifically in my situation, I come from a school in the South Bronx, and most of us are low-income students. So many of us, including myself, had to pick up jobs in order to financially support their families. So all these other societal factors kind of contributed to that academic loss. So I think that although the pandemic did impact the way that we learn in a negative way, it is an opportunity, an amazing opportunity to be able to reform our education system in a way that accommodates for all students with all ways of learning. So yeah, that's my point of view.
I think that was incredible. What wonderful points everyone made. And I really appreciate your perspective, Nicole. That was really wonderful. As we talked about technology, it kind of came up during that conversation. I want to ask Ximena, what apps and technology have you seen youth using to create movements and social change during this time? I know that's something that you work a lot in. I don't know if Ximena's here. I might have lost her. Maybe I lost her. So does anyone else, Calla or Nicole, have there been any
Can you hear me?
Oh,
I think
there you are. Yes.
I'm losing a little bit of my talking about technology. It's interesting everything you've said about technology and how we are just very pessimistic adults. We tend to be very pessimistic, and it takes to talk to young people to always see the silver linings of things. And I appreciate Sarah's point on, the acceleration of technology has been definitely a silver lining during COVID. And I think the acceleration of technology allowed also during the past 3 years for more people all over the world to get involved in movements that have really revolutionized, many areas in many countries. Here in Chile, where I am right now, it was a very large explosion of activism in 2019. At the same time, this was happening in many other places of the world, in Catalonia, Spain. We saw it in Lebanon, saw it in Hong Kong, Colombia, many places. And the common denominator of that activism was the use of technology, as well as the general frustration of people with the authorities and their governments. And this use of technology has only increased in the past year. COVID in that sense, like we said before, helped. So we saw a very interesting, phenomenon that people, will from 1 minute to another, you saw it, could create a protest demonstration anywhere quickly, bypassing all of the traditional methods of organizing that unions and organizations have used historically. We know the apps, right? Like WhatsApp is a big one, Telegram, Signal, most used, Signal in the US, but Telegram and WhatsApp all over the world. In China, with the surveillance, a lot less use of WeChat and a lot more use of technologies that were not only encrypted, but some that didn't need the internet to operate, like BridgeFi and things like that, that young people utilize there because of their worry about surveillance. Also, a lot of apps that came up, especially in the US during the protest after May of 2019, 2020 with the murder of John Floyd, and also the big problem with that we saw in all of these racial injustice, all of the killings that been happening for a long time, but that were uncovered during that time. I think all of that frustration went out to the streets, but didn't go out alone. It went out with all of these apps. Citizen, it became one very largely used because people were trying to, figure out where the police was. Some people were using it to protect themselves from, running into the police. Other people used it to avoid the protests. And again, everything powered by the internet, and today powered by smartphones. There are countries in the world that do better than others in terms of penetration, but penetration in the US for the age, all the way up to 25 is very high, is almost 100% for any type of phone, and over 90% for smartphones, which is larger and higher than what it is for the rest of the population. So yeah, apps, we have them, we love them, we create them, we replace them quickly. We have Facebook was big one time, now Clubhouse is an abundance of that. But the most important thing I think that we have is that people are behind those apps, and they're activating and they're organizing, using those apps to create movements that are physical. And a lot of those folks are young people. And the majority, the highest percentage of people actually going out to protest and demonstrations all over the world are people under the age of 25.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot of tools out there that are amplifying people's voices and allowing us to better connect with one another around the issues that are important to us. And I have this question for Calla, which is, as a young adult, what personal experiences have shaped your views on the social issues and how we're tackling them today?
Definitely. I think something that I'm so excited about this panel is the discussion around education. And for me, a lot of the shaping of my views on social issues and how I want to approach them is because of some really amazing teachers that I've had. I remember this one teacher in particular, when I was in 6th grade, I was definitely very, very shy, very insecure, and didn't really recognize the power that comes with young people learning about issues that impact, the country and the world today, and developing opinions on those, because when you have them, it's just such a powerful thing. And so what was crazy was that even though we were all, 6th grade, 11 years old, we were writing about our opinions on the Second Amendment. We were choosing a global, a UN Sustainable Development Goal and presenting on solutions. We were debating on countries that were, one of some of the greatest security threats to the United States. And so we were tackling all of these real world problems as young students. And so for me, that experience really opens my eyes to, I should be a part of these conversations, and I should, because I have this huge stake in the state of the world. And I think sometimes that gets lost a little bit on young people. And I think it's so important to remember the importance of educating myself, not just on the problems that affect me, but also that affect others and affect the state of the world, and developing opinions, and really just understanding the importance of having strong beliefs, because developing those opinions and beliefs are really what have now helped me as the co-chair of Graybridge, of the National Youth Board of Graybridge, to be able to know where I stand on, we at Graybridge tackle racial injustice, so know where I stand at that point, and be able to use, what I believe to help shape this experience that's going to be used by millions of people around the world. And so I think making sure that I'm so grateful to have had such amazing teachers, and I just really hope that the education system begins to help students to really understand the power of their voice and the power of their opinion, and help to foster those opinions. And yeah, those are probably what has really shaped my experience.
I would love to piggyback off of what Calla has to say, especially the point on having a space within an academic setting to talk about these issues and to learn about these issues. I also think it's really important, and thankfully for my experience, I started since middle school. I attended KIPP Academy Middle School in the Bronx, and I also had the honor of having, I like to call them superheroes, but having amazing teachers that not only opened up that space to have conversations about societal issues that, impacted us, because the majority, if not all of our student body, were students of color. Yeah, Latinx students, African American students. So these were situations that we were going to face or live and view, right around the corner of our house. And speaking from experience, that is the truth. You are exposed to these societal issues at a very young age, and it's hard to kind of realize what is happening in this world. Why are my people being attacked? And why isn't anyone doing anything? So, it was that thing of like having a space within an academic setting and having, I guess, like a teacher to guide us through, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening. And then also being able to give us a space to figure out how do we want to change these issues, and giving us the tools of like, there's policy making, there's activism, you need to advocate for yourself. Being able to learn about those tools at such an early age is what I think helped me at least develop into the woman that I am today. Without those tools, without the opportunity to actually talk about these issues in a safe space, I don't think I would have been able to really understand, how can I create change even at the age of 18, because I think that's also something that a lot of us tend to think. It's like, I'm 17, I'm 18, what can I do? I don't know, I don't think I have, the money or like the stance as an adult to be able to make change. But it's not true. You're never too young to make power moves, and that's something that I was able to learn through having that safe space in a classroom, to learn the tools on how to create change and what's happening in our world. So yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think it's so important to have those safe spaces. So this next question is for Sarah. How can we create environments and moments where kids feel safe to ask tough questions and provide the emotional support to help in their understanding of what's going on?
I think the first piece is recognizing that kids can handle it, that kids are noticing what we as adults are talking about and what's going on around them. And, my oldest daughter, she's almost 4. But when the coronavirus started a year ago, my husband and I were deliberately not talking about it around her. And that was, I don't know if that was the smartest decision, because she's hearing about it. Her life is changing. She's asking me why I can't go inside so-and-so's house. I don't remember what Miriam's house looks like inside. Why can't I have play dates inside? And it's important to recognize that kids can handle it, and we have to create an environment for these conversations. They're hearing it in the news, they're seeing it all around, and to be aware of the developmental level of the child and to have conversations aligned with where the child is developmentally. So giving space for expression through mediums that are comfortable to the child. So allowing my daughter, who processed loss for the first time in her life, she lost her great grandfather to COVID, and explaining that to her and allowing her to draw how she's feeling, allowing her to use her baby dolls to role play. And I'm hearing conversations with her baby dolls about so-and-so dying, and this means they're not here. And she's working through that through play, through her imagination. Again, we do a lot of art in our house, so that's also a tool that she's using. And creating open-ended time for play where those conversations can take shape is really important, and to know that those feelings are valid.
Yeah, if I could add on for my personal experience, kind of going through this crazy time that we're living in, I was feeling extremely helpless when I would see, news cycles of just horrible violence or laws being passed or decisions being made that I didn't agree with. And that was definitely really hard on my mental health, especially through this past year with all of the stresses of the pandemic. And I think what made that even worse was that I couldn't really find any opportunities to take all of this energy that was built up and passion from witnessing the injustice that was going on and put it towards actual good. And I think this summer definitely was a spotlight on the horrific racial injustice that exists in America. And so, as a typical Gen Z would do, I took to Google and I remember just typing in, how can I support the racial justice movement? And on top of every list was vote, which is something I couldn't do because I'm 17, which there was, attend a march or hold a rally, which during a pandemic isn't really a thing that can be done. I'm very lucky to live in Washington, D.C., so I did get to attend a few marches, but that, which was definitely really empowering, but that, that feeling of I'm doing something will only last a few days because then I began to search for what can I do to have a sustained impact. And so I think the way to really ease the burden of this world that's full of turmoil for young people is to give them a chance to take action, opening up the floor in schools and in organizations to let them, speak out on their experiences and what they think is right, putting young people in leadership positions where they can actually make a difference is just so important. And, I've definitely been really blessed with my work with Graybridge because we're creating this app where people can take action by learning about the key issues around racial injustice, by learning how to make connections with people, and then being able to make an impact in their local community. And so I think it's really opportunities like these that allow young people to take what they believe and put it into action, which will not only help their personal well-being, but the well-being of the nation and the world, really.
I also think that, the pandemic, one thing that it did is that help us to talk to each other, especially at home. We're kind of people are forced to talk to each other. And that's a really good thing and something that's been missing. Part of the problem, I think, in the world too, and I look at this, I spent the past 4 months in Chile, where the anxiety over social issues is as high as this in the US. I think it comes from the lack of understanding and the lack of empathy. We don't build empathy because we don't debate. We don't talk about things that are controversial. We don't talk about them at home. We don't talk about them at church. We don't talk about them, anywhere. And so when you are, no matter what age you are, your thinking is framed by your view of the world. And that is a very narrow way to interpret the issues of the world. The hardest thing to do is to actually have a conversation with someone we don't agree with. And that is a large portion of people that feel disconnected from the talk. So I think the people of color like me, like some of you, we have power into trying to, also bridge that, hold our hand and maybe reach to others that may not necessarily think the way they do because they hate us, is because that's the experience that they had over time, or perhaps because we never heard of them, we never listened to their views. So just as much as it is to fight for racial injustice and for lack of equity across the board, as important it is also to develop dialogue and to create environments where we don't perpetuate the silos that historically we inherited. So if we're going to do something right for the future, let's not repeat the behaviors that have been done in the past. And that's where technology can be used for good or for evil. You see now Potler, Twitter, let's pick. I just want to hear people that think the same than I do, and I'm just gonna pick the social media so I don't have to hear you if I don't like you. And I think that's where young people can come in and share their thoughts with the lawmakers around Section 230 and around all of the conversations now and legislations that are being discussed regarding those issues, because the freedom of speech is very much tied to that ability and the stomach that we have and the tolerance that we have to hear and have the endurance to have the conversations that we're really not used to do. So I really hope that young people like you can change the path that we have, because the result of the path historically has only been division, has only been a war. Since ancient times, our way to solve our differences has been through blood. It never been through anything else. Even the social justice movements of the past had all been violent, and they are like that all over the world. So I think if we want a better world, we have to change the way that we talk about issues that involve all of us, and to try to put ourselves in the shoes of that other person to create understanding and to build empathy.
Yep. And I think that is so important, to build empathy. And I would love to hear from Karim on what can you tell us about how students and their ability to have resilience and have these types of conversations and build empathy.
I mean, I was speaking to classes last May, and kids were asking me about what our company was doing in the wake of like all of the racial justice issues. And so back to Sarah's point about talking to kids, and it's weird. I always thought when I was a kid that I was just as smart when I was 10 as I am today. The only difference is that I could articulate myself very differently today. And so those thoughts, those emotions, those feelings, and the way I think about things, I can put into words in a way that I couldn't when I was a lot younger. And so I always treat and talk to kids as if they're adults. And I try to explain things, keep them simple, but kids are resilient. Kids are idealistic. And one of the examples that I always love to use, it must have been 10 years ago now, I had a friend who both asked kids and adults, if you can change one thing about your body, what would it be? And all of these adults who've now lived life for a while are like, oh, I want a smaller nose, I want to be taller, I want bigger ears, I want wider eyes. And then he went to the kids and he said, kids, like, if you can change one thing about your body, what would it be? And the kids came back and said, I want a mermaid tail. I want cheetah legs. I want shark jaws. And it's only through our ability to think that these things are possible can we start to create something. Like, yes, may not be able to change their legs and give them cheetah legs tomorrow, but could we create something that we can put on our legs that will enhance the speed at which we run at? Can we put something on our legs when we're in the water that will allow us to move like a mermaid in there? And so it's that level of like thinking that our kids still have today, that level of idealism, that creativity that's going to prepare them for the world that we're moving into. And we talk about controversy and we talk about living in our own bubbles. And actually, one of the things that I've been most, I don't know if afraid is the right word, but I'm at least watching unfold. At least within my peer group, a lot of folks I talk to are like, we just did an entire year remotely. And for better or for worse, some people have had positive experiences, some people have had negative experiences, but everyone seems to be coming out on the other side saying it is possible to live and work in this world, right? We did it. Whether or not we liked it, whether or not it was great, we did it. And so they can't imagine going back to the way the world was before. Yet there's still a generation of folks who are saying, actually, this world was horrible and we don't want anything to do with this world. And if the world became this as is, things would be very different. And so I'm trying to balance what will be truth versus like what is fake, so to say. I don't want to relive a 2016 election where everyone around you is saying, oh, I'm going to vote for Hillary, I'm going to vote for Hillary. And then you go to the polls and find out Donald Trump is elected president. A lot of folks now are saying, hey, I want a more flexible work style, right? I can't imagine going to the office 5 days a week again. And so even if we wind up in a world where we're now there 4 days a week, you have that one day left off that wasn't there before. And what does that mean for the education profession? And what does it mean for teachers who didn't necessarily have that flexibility, at least not during this pandemic, but are still in the category of knowledge workers? right? It's already a profession that struggles to attract really smart, high quality talent. And now when you're graduating from college, if your friends are going to work in flexible workspaces, but you going into teaching doesn't have that sort of profession or setup, I think we're going to be even less competitive and deal with an even larger shortage than we already have. So still trying to sift through that to think about what that future is. I'm not saying kids won't be in a school building for 5 days, but what does teacher flexibility in that workplace look like? What are the advancements that we could take from this like time period with technology, and start to think about how we design our workplaces, our work environments, and our working world. So to Ximena's point, yeah, we don't debate often enough. These conversations happen in silos, and then we just kind of live with whatever the reality is.
I'd love to chime in if that's okay. The example you gave, Karim, of a child responding with, "Oh, I'd have a mermaid tail," or "I'd have giraffe legs." I was cackling over here on mute because I could totally imagine my daughters responding that way. And I think it's a good reminder for us as adults that both empathy and creativity have to be cultivated. These are skills that require practice. Empathy, I often say, empathy is a muscle, and I think creativity is the same, that we have to flex. Just like we practice reading or math, we have to practice feeling for others and using our imagination. And unfortunately, for us as adults, kids are better at that because there's been less time of it being beat out of them from the system that is our current education system. And so what can we do as adults? We can create open spaces for dialogue. We can listen. We can follow their lead. We cannot always be the ones dictating the activities or the lessons, but see where they take us. See the response. Oh, I want to put on cheetah legs or a mermaid tail. Okay, let's move around the room. Let's move around the space like we have our imaginary body parts. Like, let them lead us. And we don't have to always be in control as the adults, as the parents, as the educators, because we have so much to learn from the creativity and the empathy of our kids.
Definitely. And I think it's so important to empower our youth today to take on and be in control of certain things. So this question is for Calla. Can you tell us a little bit about placing young people in, how placing young people into leadership roles and will encourage opportunity and agency in youth to combat these social issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that something that I really underestimated as a young person is kind of that the power of being in a leadership role, especially being in a society where, you know, if you're a young person and you want to go work somewhere, typically you're going to be at the bottom. But through my work at Graybridge, what's been really incredible is that our National Youth Board, which is, you know, me and Nicole and a few other college students, high school students from around the country, we've been given so much stake in the work that we're doing. And so we'll be on meetings with content partners and helping to shape what the user experience will be like, or we'll be on partner meetings where we're pitching Graybridge to different universities or corporations. And so I just think that putting young people in situations where their voice can be heard and are a part of the decision-making process, just and giving agency just makes it's all of us just so much more passionate and invested in the work that's being done. And I think this increased involvement really allows the talents and the abilities of young people to be fully used, especially when it comes to organizations that are combating injustice or social issues. You know, the ripples of inequality that have existed for centuries are not just felt by adults, but they're felt by young people too. And so young people are going to be the ones that are growing up to be in the driver's seat of changing the world. And so personally, I just think not giving young people a seat at the table to make an impact on the future that is theirs too is really a missed opportunity. So I don't think it can be overstated, the importance of giving young people a chance to use their voice to have impact and be put in leadership positions.
To add on, I think that everything you said, Cal, was great. And also, I think that having that opportunity, I think Calla can agree with me on this. Just being able to have that opportunity at Graybridge to just be able to be put in a leadership role and for the first time, um, in a space, having a seat at the table and just being able to say, oh, there are people that are actually listening now. People are really listening and they really care about what I'm thinking is so vital to the development of leaders of tomorrow. I think that being able to provide that space for young students to just say, hey, what do you think about this? Why do you want this to change? How can we do it? And not and really opening their eyes to kind of like being like, it's possible for you to make change. It is possible and I'm willing to help you, is what have found to be something so crucial in the development of who I am as a human being, but also who I am as an advocate, as an activist, as a leader. And in a sense, the youth board has served as kind of like a mentorship program, if you think about it. As much as I think adults have to learn about from young individuals, I think we also, of course, have a lot to learn from leaders that have already been doing this for so long. So I think that we can't become the leaders that we want to be without the guidance of our mentors. And so having that space, having a safe space, and having a space that welcomes that creativity, like Sarah said, I think is so vital for the development of leaders and just the development of human beings in general. So yeah.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you for answering my questions. We have some questions that people have sent in, so I'm going to ask you guys to answer those now. And the first one is, how do you as leaders within your own communities keep hope when things seem bleak? And I'll have you comment on this first, Karim.
It's tough. I mean, Nicole was talking about, and Calla were talking about specifically like waking up in this last year and feeling helpless. And, when this first started, we're all human. I had those moments too, where you wake up and you're like, oh man, like, is this thing really bigger than us? But I don't know if it's just this like optimism, this view of the glass is always half full that's just been ingrained in me ever since I was a young kid. Um, I always go back to that. I was raised by a single mother on government aid, went through some of New York City's most struggling public schools, but was fortunate to have a series of nonprofits and mentors. And I now look back on a lot of the adversity as having shaped me into the individual I am today. And so I think it's through my meditation, through my own practice, that I always look for the silver lining, and there's always silver lining. And one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given is that anything that happens in life is neutral, and everything that happens in life is neutral, right? We're the ones who instill or impose value onto things, right? That judge them as positive or negative. COVID is COVID, right? And so do we see it as positive? Like, there are all these people who are talking about it being an accelerant, all these good things that have come from it, and there are others who are seeing it as negative. And I think you can continue to reflect on that. But yeah, it's a mindset shift, and always remembering that there is silver lining in everything that's happening.
Definitely. Sarah?
Yeah, I would say similarly that everything is ephemeral, that it's fleeting, that nothing is here forever and will eventually pass, and we will move through. And just like you, Karim, I think that comes from a strong meditation practice, but recognizing that we're not going to sit in a state or a feeling for eternity. We will eventually move through it. There will be highs, there will be lows, but it's how we move through and navigate those highs and lows that really shape who we are. And then just like a corny, but the one that came to mind when you asked, like, well, how do you keep going? I mean, for me, it's my daughters and just wanting to build a world for them that is fuller and more inclusive and safer, where they and all kids can thrive. And I think that really gives me a sense of hope and purpose.
Just to piggyback off of what Sarah said, and I think something really big, at least for me, with keeping hope is also just reaching out to loved ones, reaching out to your support system and having these conversations and just talking about your feelings on, like, what is happening today. I mean, I know for me, when George Floyd was murdered, I was in a state of shock. I kind of was more so, I was feeling that sense of hopelessness, right? And so what I did and what helped me a lot, and I know helped a lot of people, was reaching out to loved ones. And that's what I did. I reached out to mentors, I reached out to friends, I reached out to teachers, and I'm like, look, this is, I don't know what to do in this situation. How do you feel? And having that comfort of being like, I'm not alone in this, you know, this is not just a feeling that I'm feeling, this is a feeling that everyone seems to be feeling. That sense of like, what should we do, not only creates a sense of comfort, but it also creates a sense of community. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to foster community, right? So I think that reaching out to loved ones has definitely helped with keeping the hope.
Great.
For me, it's interesting because, I used to be an educator. I was a school principal and assistant superintendent of a schools. And then I moved into technology, and I found that, a pioneer company in digital technology for grassroots advocacy that is used, pretty much everywhere. And I'm Chilean, and I'm a woman of color. I'm an immigrant in the US. And so I'm older, obviously, than a lot of you. So I have seen a little bit of the drama twice. I see COVID in Chile, COVID in the US, the issues, the social issues in the US, and then see all of the division and the social issues in Chile. And I am more of a person that instead of looking sometimes for a calm, I look for struggle. Frederick Douglass said, without a struggle, there is no progress. And it's probably a bad thing. I wish I would be the one that meditates. I wish I would be the one that keeps things calm. I am more the opposite. I look for trouble. And so I try to have the difficult conversations with people that don't want to have them. And, people in my family, for example, they don't want to talk about politics because they feel that when they talk about politics, there is, discussion and everybody agrees. And, half of the people think is the problem is the government, the other, depending on what the government of the turn is, so it's always the lens of the political party. And I think in the US, to some extent, that also plays out. But I know that that's not the way. So I written a little bit about this and about the debate is a muscle. And like Sarah said, empathy is a muscle, where debate is a muscle too. And I think it brings empathy to the table, but you have to stay through it. You have to actually linger long enough to get through the tough conversation. And then at the end, actually have like an aha moment that may not be very clear, but it's something inside of you and inside of the person that puts the two views a little bit together. And so I don't look necessarily for support or, all those things. And I think all those things are absolutely things I should do. I am a little bit more of I try to have the conversation. I want to talk more. Especially to the folks that don't. And in those conversations, especially with my nephews, I have seen that sometimes the views are not, they're not all that different. That are actually we're a lot more alike than we used to when we think we are. The issue, I think, is that people go back to what they like to hear and see, and they're framed by their experiences. Immigration in Chile, for example, is really difficult right now. Racism comes from the way that people feel immigrants here affecting their lives. So I can see how, in the US, my presence could be a little bit difficult for some people that, they were not prepared for that. So I think that's where our politicians come in place. That's where policies come in place. And this is why young people need to go into politics. They need to go into places where these conversations can actually take a form of legislation, because or actually, be a director of an agency or something like that, so they can actually be thoughtful about the things that they do to communities and societies, so they don't pit people against each other by bad policies. So, you asked a question about what I look for. I look for that. I look for, a way out, a solution to something, a conversation that leads to some action. Protesting, raising your hand, agreeing with, we all agree on that. But my hope is that people like you all could actually be the ones that have the endurance to have those conversations and the muscle to be in public office, so you could do the right thing for the long term to prevent some of the things that we're seeing right now, because we're using the same old bad political methods that we used in the Roman era.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And then I want to just squeeze in one more question before we kind of wrap up today. And I'll have Calla start. One of the audience asked, how should youth interact with businesses to create positive change? I don't know if you have any experience working with businesses, but how can youth work with businesses that exist to make a change?
Absolutely. I think the biggest part, as we were touching on a bit earlier, is just giving them a seat at the table. It's really important to have this partnership where the youth, I think as Sarah touched on, are having these innovative ideas, are being creative, are envisioning a future that, for adults who've just been living in this world that's been the way it is, it's harder to envision. But I think, and then on the other hand, having the adults who have so much experience, so much knowledge, that come from a background of, just full of experience and things that they know how to get things done. I think having that sort of collaboration is so important and will really help to maximize, in my opinion, success of any business in any industry. And so, yeah, I would, the biggest thing I would say is just inviting them to have a seat at the table. If you have interns at a business, invite them to be a part of a decision-making conversation. Giving people the opportunity, I think, is, you'll be surprised, the way that they are able to contribute. So in the future that I'm going to grow up in, I'm really looking forward to more multi-generational collaborations in business, for sure.
That's great. I love that. If anyone else wants to chime in real quickly, or getting a little low on that time, but I would love to hear from you. Karim?
Yeah, no, I would just say don't wait for an invitation. Most times, like, businesses are open to hearing from youth. And so I think I was reflecting on a second grader or first grader the other day, wrote a little paper about how Gap needed to put real pockets for little girls in the front, and Gap responded saying, sending her jeans, but also saying hey, we're going to work on this. And so I love hearing from kids. I love hearing from our youth. I love hearing from people outside of that. So I don't get to respond to everyone all the time, but that doesn't mean we're not listening and that businesses aren't listening. So I'd encourage you all to continue to reach out and don't wait for an invitation.
I love that. Definitely. We all, I think, are used to being invited to participate in conversations, but being able to just feel comfortable to just share is so important. All right, I'm going to have everyone, I would love for people to share, if they're comfortable, where people can get in touch with you and stay in touch, social media, website, that sort of thing. I'll have Sarah start. Kind of, where can people stay in touch with you?
Sure. So movethisworld.com, sarahpotlerlahayne.com. Something to know is, if you are an educator or a parent, you can check out Emotion Motion. It's a podcast for kids 3 to 8, and their grown-up season 2 actually drops tomorrow. It's an opportunity to connect with your kids in screen-free ways to cultivate connection and play and empathy and creativity. So that's a tool that you can check out after this.
For me, on my side, our website is practicemakesperfect.org, and then my personal website, just my first and last name.com. But I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Clubhouse. So feel free to reach out on any one of those platforms.
Great. Nicole?
So, you can also, for me and Calla, check out the Graybridge website. I can also just put the link in the chat. And personally, if you'd like to reach out to me, I can also drop my email in the chat and my LinkedIn. So,
I would also say, oh, sorry. I was gonna say, if you're a business owner, or you work at a business, or if you're youth watching this and attend a school, through graybridge.org, you can apply to be a Graybridge school or business to help your organization work towards racial unity.
I put my info in the chat. Personal website has a form there, but my name is actually my Twitter and Medium, and my email address is x@tech apprenticeships. So it's really easy. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Well, thank you all for such a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed learning from all of you. And I'm going to send it back over to Jamie to wrap us up.
I just want to thank this amazing panel of leaders so much for being here today, sharing your stories. I am so inspired by this conversation. So thank you so much. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for watching. We hope to connect with all of you soon, and we will be in touch with future events like this one. So have a great day, afternoon, morning, night, whatever time it may be where you are. And we hope to see you all soon.